All right, today we are diving deep, and I mean way back, into one of the oldest stories humanity ever bothered to write down. It's got everything: gods, monsters, an epic friendship, and yeah, the very first attempt to cheat death. We're talking about the Epic of Gilgamesh, a story that literally carved the blueprint for almost every hero's journey we know and love today. So before you even think about Achilles or Hercules, you've got to know about Gilgamesh. His story? It's over 4,000 years old. That's insane. We're talking way before the Greek myths, even before many of the stories in the Bible were put together. This guy, a king from Mesopotamia, had his adventures etched into clay tablets. And honestly, his story is basically the original superhero blockbuster. It's the OG.
Okay, so let's meet this first hero. But here's the thing. He's complicated. He's part god, part man, and, well, at the beginning of his story, he's a total tyrant.
So Gilgamesh, the legendary king of Uruk, get this, the epic says he's 2/3 god and 1/3 man. Now you might be wondering, how does that math even work? Well, his mom was a goddess, Ninsun, and his dad was immortal. This, let's call it a divine recipe, gave him incredible superhuman powers. But that 1/3 human part, that's the kicker. It left him with a massive vulnerability. He was terrified of dying. And that conflict, right there, is the engine that drives this whole incredible story. As the king of this amazing city, Uruk, Gilgamesh was, well, he was a force of nature. The guy had endless energy. He never rested, day or night, and he was a master builder. He built these incredible, legendary walls around Uruk that were famous even back then. But, and this is a big but, all that power went straight to his head. He became a complete tyrant, just running his people into the ground. It got so bad that they started praying to the gods, just begging for someone to help them.
And guess what? The gods actually listened, but their solution wasn't to just get rid of Gilgamesh. Oh no, they had a much more interesting idea, and it sets up one of the greatest friendships in all of literature.
So to humble this arrogant king, the gods create his equal, a wild man named Enkidu. And when I say wild, I mean wild. He's basically Gilgamesh's polar opposite. He's raised by animals, lives in the wilderness, knows nothing about cities or people. He's pure, untamed nature, the perfect foil for our city slicker tyrant. This is the ultimate nature versus civilization showdown.
So when these two finally meet, it's not a friendly chat. They have this insane, knockdown, drag-out fight that literally shakes the foundations of the city. But something amazing happens. Instead of one destroying the other, they realize they've met their match. They find this incredible respect for each other. And just like that, this epic rivalry turns into the deepest friendship you can imagine. They become this inseparable duo, going on heroic quests, like taking down the monster Humbaba in the cedar forest.
But of course, you can't just go around slaying divine monsters without consequences. Their adventures really tick off the gods, and they decide one of them has to pay the price. Enkidu is the one who gets sick and dies, and Gilgamesh is just completely shattered. The way the epic describes his grief is just heartbreaking. He's not a king anymore, not a tyrant. He's just a man who's lost the most important person in his life.
Now, does any of this sound familiar to you? You know, a legendary hero, his best friend who's like a brother to him, and a tragic death that the hero feels responsible for? Well, fast forward 1,000 years, and you get the story of Achilles and Patroclus in the Iliad. It's the same pattern. The parallels are just, they're impossible to ignore. It really shows you how this story from Mesopotamia became a template for heroes for centuries to come. But the epic bromance isn't the only trope Gilgamesh pioneered. His story also includes another, massive tale that you've definitely heard before. A story about a great, world-ending flood.
And that brings up a really fascinating question, right? Why do we see this story pop up everywhere? Mesopotamia, ancient Greece, the Old Testament, all these cultures telling a story about a massive flood that wipes out humanity. The Epic of Gilgamesh has one of the absolute oldest versions of this story, and the similarities to the others are just wild. It makes you wonder, what was happening back then that made so many different people tell the same kind of story?
So if you look at the different versions, the reasons for the flood are a little different. In Mesopotamia, the gods are annoyed because humans are just being too noisy. Seriously, in the Bible, it's because humans were wicked. And for the Greeks, it was because they were impious. But look past that, and the core of the story is almost identical. A god warns one hero, that hero builds a big boat, and they survive to start humanity all over again. I mean, the similarities are just jaw-dropping.
And check out this one specific detail from the Gilgamesh version. The survivor, a guy named Utnapishtim, needs to know if there's any dry land. So what does he do? He sends out birds. First, a dove comes back. Then a swallow comes back. Finally, he sends out a raven, and that one doesn't return. That's how he knows the flood is over. Now, if that sounds a lot like Noah sending a raven and a dove from the ark, well, you're not wrong.
But here's a detail that is uniquely Mesopotamian, and it's kind of weird. So after the flood, Utnapishtim makes a sacrifice to thank the gods. And how do the gods react? The epic says they gathered like flies over the sacrifice. They were literally starving because there were no humans left to give them offerings. It's such a raw, gritty, and very human way to describe these powerful gods, you know?
All right, so the death of his best friend, Enkidu, and hearing the story about the flood, it all brings Gilgamesh face to face with his biggest fear, his own death. And this kicks off the final and maybe the most important part of his entire epic journey.
This isn't about glory anymore. It's not about adventure. Gilgamesh is straight up running for his life, or more accurately, running from death. He becomes obsessed. He sets off on this crazy, dangerous quest to find Utnapishtim, that flood survivor, because he's the only human who has ever made immortal. Gilgamesh has to know his secret.
And why was he so terrified? Well, you have to understand what the Mesopotamian afterlife was like. It was no paradise. It was called the House of Darkness, a grim, dusty place where the dead just existed. They ate clay for food and were dressed in feathers like birds. It's this bleak, hopeless vision of eternity, and that's exactly what's pushing Gilgamesh to find any way out. So after going through all these incredible challenges, Gilgamesh finally finds Utnapishtim. But he doesn't get the answer he wants. He learns the brutal truth. Immortality was a special, one-time gift from the gods. It's not something you can earn. He's even given a test to prove he's worthy, and he fails it. In the end, he's forced to accept that dying is just part of being human. So defeated Gilgamesh heads home to his city, Uruk. But as he's looking at the incredible walls that he built at the beginning of the story, something clicks. He has this huge epiphany. He turns to his companion and tells him, "Go on, walk on the wall, look at the brickwork." He finally gets it. Real immortality isn't about your body living forever. It's about what you leave behind. It's in the things you build, the deeds you do, the stories people tell about you long after you're gone.
And speaking of legacies, man, what a legacy Gilgamesh left. His story has lasted for more than 4,000 years, not because of stone walls, but because it became a pillar of how we tell stories, period.
I mean, just think about everything this one story gave us, maybe for the very first time. The whole idea of a hero's journey, where it's not just about fighting monsters, but about the hero changing and growing inside. The idea that a powerful friendship can completely transform you. That classic struggle between nature and civilization. And maybe the biggest one of all, it was one of the first stories to really tackle that universal human fear of death and our search for meaning. It's all there. Gilgamesh really did lay the foundation.
So seriously, the next time you're watching a superhero movie, or reading a fantasy epic, or even just a story about a complicated hero, look for Gilgamesh. I promise you, he's there. You'll see his arrogance, his capacity for deep friendship, his fear of losing someone, and his search for a legacy. Because after 4,000 years, we are all, in one way or another, still telling his story. So I'll leave you with this. What parts of Gilgamesh do you see in the heroes we love today?